My daughter is embarrassed by the fact that her dad is old. The other day my 9-year-old daughter told me that her friends made fun of her because her dad is 57 while their dads are in their 30s. She said she wants me to pick her up from school from now on because she doesn't want her friends to see him. He overheard our convo and took it personally. After she left he said, "See, this is why I didn't want kids," reminding me that our daughter was an accident. I feel bad. What can I do to solve this situation? I don't want this to affect his self-esteem or their relationship. I think the much bigger issue here is that he didn't want kids, the daughter was unplanned and he still hasn't accepted, warmed to the role of being a parent. Because frankly if he still, after 9 years, talks like that I wonder how his relationship is with her. Not sure if this helps but I'm 21 and my dad had me when he was 57. Hes always been pret active and friendly to my friends. The only problems I had growing up I was a little embarrassed to tell people my father's age but eventually I didn't care. H is a great father and is liked among my friends. This definitely could be just kids being jerks. I'd say own up to it. Let the father pick her up and tell her to be proud. I was in a similar situation as a child. I think the main thing to realize here is that kids have a hard time understanding and expressing their feelings. I lashed out at my parents for being too old, and telling them I wish they would have had me sooner. But I was really just trying to process the fact that I wouldn't have as much time with them as other kids, and I was scared of losing them. IDK why everyone is being so rude here. I think you should sit down with your daughter and husband and talk with them. Make your daughter understand the situation and that her words had effect on others. This is a really bad thing. As she gets older her perspective of her father may not change and neither of his. And it's not really his fault for being sad. I would be too if my kid would say something like that. Her friends are not really nice. You should really tell her it doesn't matter if her father's old or something. I hope you get through this. Stay strong man, and communication is key to solving everything. She's still young so there's a lot of time and room to learn. Teach her the right things and her perspective will change eventually. I'd be more worried about the 57-year-old man who seems to have roughly the same maturity as a 9-year-old. Kids say dumb shit all the time and have feelings that are wildly irrational and disappear soon enough. The fact that your husband is upset over this inconsequential phase is way more concerning than whatever the undeveloped mind of your child can cook up. Your husband should take a good hard look at himself and his insecurities. If a 57-year-old man can let a 9-year-old child and her friends hurt his self-esteem, he needs to re-evaluate his life. He's older than her friends' dads, so what? Info. How old are you? My dad had me when he was 45. I remember kids asking me why my grandfather was picking me up from school when it was my dad. However, for me, my dad was so many things that, old, never even came to mind or bothered me. That was just my dad, who I always thought was funny and cool, smart and a good driver and had cool sunglasses. Age is unchangeable, and it is not a characteristic or a quality. I hope your daughter can see clearly all the great stuff about her dad, so the age comments don't bother her. That's how I always felt. There's nothing embarrassing about my dad, he is awesome. My parents had me when they were older. My mom actually lied about her age when I was young, and when I was about 10 I learned her real age. I had a mini crisis. It's hard as a kid. There are certain things most people in middle age can't do compared to younger parents. Attitudes are different. Being different, even if it's your parents are different, can lead to getting bullying. It's hard. She'll move past it. It will take time. But once peer pressure stops having as much of an effect, she'll probably feel kind of bad for being embarrassed. Too late for that. This is why you don't have kids both of you didn't want. Especially if he's still bringing that up now. Personally, your husband's response is more of a concern than what your daughter said. I had older parents and was embarrassed by them when I was that age. I eventually just got over it without much fanfare. I'd talk to your husband more and get him to reflect on what he said, why he said that, if that's truly how he feels, etc. Although his feeling upset was valid, that is not a healthy response to the situation. When I was a child, I had the opposite problem. My mother was young enough for the other primary school-aged children to think she was my sister. I used to get embarrassed because of this too, usually due to the questions and needing to explain. I think what really resonated with me was my grandmother's conversation with me about empathy, compassion and kindness, and that families come in all shapes and sizes, and that includes parents as well. I remember seeing it differently, and it helped me have an explanation, as all families look different. She talked to me about loving all the shapes and sizes that families come in, and that includes age as well. When I graduated HS, my parents were like 49 both. So not the same age as your husband, but my friends did make fun of me as well because my parents were older. I don't understand some kids. Some people's parents were like 36 when they graduated, but I didn't say shit about that. I'm sorry your daughter said something hurtful. I'd sit both down and say, what you said wasn't very nice, and to your husband, how you responded wasn't nice either. Ouch. Give him a minute to feel bad and then tell him to get over it. They're kids. They're going to pick on your daughter sometimes, and this time it's because her dad is older than their dads. Next week, they'll be picking on someone else because their mom has big boobs. Your hubby is being a dweeb. Kids say stupid things and are self-conscious in the dumbest way. I used to say shit like this, and my dad used to be hurt but amused at his hurtness because he knew I was just a lil kid. Your daughter is literally just going through social pressures, and it's just the difference between her and other kids that embarrasses her. Is he always such a delicate flower? I was raised by my grandfather and his younger wife, and I can honestly say I never thought his age was a big deal. I find this a bit concerning and wonder about their overall relationship. I mean, what if she had an obese parent and kids teased her for that? Or if her parent had an obvious physical disability, or something else physical that ultimately doesn't impact their relationship as a parent-child. I think 9 is old enough to talk to your daughter about her father's feelings, and about concepts like ageism and letting the opinion of others impact family relationships with loved ones. Unless you think underneath this there's another reason, that there's something about their relationship that she's acting out on. For what it's worth, my dad used to drive trucks and was never at home much for us growing up, but that's what he did to put food on the table. One day my older sister turned to him and said he never loved us because if he did then he would be at home more, and it broke his heart. Years later, after living out in the world for a little, she came home and apologized because she just didn't understand how some things work and didn't know dad was away all the time so we could have money to live. Kids can say some terrible things growing up when they don't realize how lucky that they have parents around and that care for them. It's all part of growing up. Tell your husband to stay strong. My dad was 55 when I was born. My dad had a white beard at that age, so he looked like a black Santa. So I was just the girl whose dad was Black Santa. I had a lot of love for both of my folks back then, and if anyone tried to say anything about their age, I'd defend them and say they were wonderful. I was blessed to have older parents for X, Y, and Z reasons, etc. I refused to have anyone talk bad about my family. Try this. Tell your daughter that her father is level 57. All those other kids have lower level fathers while her father is a higher level. If she asks why that matters, explain her father has more experience and more upgrades and more talents, perks, skills. If you can get the husband on board with this, it might work better. Kids are embarrassed by their parents. That is constant. The reason why may change, but the embarrassment is always there. If it wasn't his age, it would be something else. You can't take it personally. So her dad's reaction to her getting teased at school is to say he shouldn't have had her in the first place. I'm sorry, but that's kinda fucked up. See? This is why I didn't want kids. Shoulda got a vasectomy, dude. He sucks. There are so many people judging the father just because he has feelings, that's kinda sad. Yes, you have the right to be upset when your own daughter don't want you to come take her at school to hide you from her friends. When my daughter was about 7, she asked me to wait down the street for her after school. I did it. After a few days I asked why. She got quite upset, but I finally got her to tell me. The reason was some boy at school had told her I was as fat as a whale and she thought I'd be upset if I heard. I laughed, and said yes, I am fat, but that boy is rude and that's is really a bad thing to be. She relaxed a bit after this and a few days later told me she had said that to the boy. Yeah, my mum's fat, but you're rude and that's way worse. She enjoyed having that retort ready for him. I'd suggest being this matter of fact. Yes, her dad's older than some others, but it's not nice to point that out. Lol, at first I felt bad for the guy. Kids can be assholes, but does he really think this way about her? What the fuck? I hope he didn't mean it. Maybe he didn't, and in that case, you should tell your daughter that he overheard and his feelings were deeply hurt. I know she's young, but she needs to understand why it doesn't matter that he's old and that she loves him. If he did mean it, the dumbass needs to grow up, and I hope she hurts his feelings again. My dad has always been old enough to he my grandpa. I didn't care. Everyone made fun of him for it. I'd tell them that he looks like Santa Claus and he loves me. How old are you? In your 30s like the other parents? I once worked with a man in his early 30s. His father was 60 when he was born and had died at 90 a couple of years earlier. He absolutely adored his father, would say that his father took him to school and collected him every day, was always home and always had time for him as he was retired. He was adamant that he had an unbelievably wonderful childhood, and although he had less time with his dad than many people, in terms of quality it was better than many people's. Because his dad was always there for everything, everyone knew his dad was 60 years older than him, and it was old news. I felt quite envious of him, if truth be told. This speaks to the confidence that your daughter doesn't have. If anyone at school had made fun of my parents, I would have laughed and told them to push off, because I had so much confidence. What can you do to improve your child's personal confidence and sense of self? There are some great self-help books on this. As others have said, this is likely her processing her feelings that she just can't understand, that her dad won't be around as much or as active in her life as other dads. My parents had me when they were much older, and I had to deal with the same thing. Seeing my friends with their young and active parents, it kinda hurt in a way you can understand as a kid. I always was disappointed with my dad as a child for never being there for me to play or hang out. However, he was working well into what should be his retirement to get me an education and a good quality of life, and he was just too old to keep up with an active kid. She will figure herself out in time, and he needs to understand it's not personal. Kids are cruel and will find any way to hurt others, especially if it involves parents. I would remind him of what a great partner he is and how his contributions to her growing up are not limited by his age. My dad had me when he was 56. I remember when he was attending my award assemblies or any other event in elementary school, I was embarrassed because all the other parents were young and beautiful. Growing up and thinking back to this, I am ashamed and deeply regret it. My dad is the best. If I were you, I'd have a talk with your daughter and ask why she feels embarrassed and advise her not to, because of all these reasons as to why her dad is the best even if he isn't young and beautiful. She's a kid. She's not mature enough to realize that crap doesn't really matter. I would have given anything to have a dad growing up, old or not. I mean, it is messed up. At some point she's going to realize that he has a really big chance of never being a grandparent or walking her down the aisle. It's a selfish thing to have a child at that age. IDK, what to tell you? I think it's a good time to talk to your daughter about the fact that other people's opinions and comments are just that. They have no bearing on her actual life, and people will always have them. The only way it will be embarrassing is if she is embarrassed herself, and that she should own the fact she has a father of a more mature stock to which there are many benefits. I'm sure that at least one or two of the kids making comments either don't have one or has a step-parent, a reality of these Timia. With regards to the dad, he's probably feeling like down. You will have to remind him that she's a child and that ultimately he is her dad, accident or not. Little girl talk should not be bringing him down like that. He should be emotionally mature enough now to handle this. I had similar case. Kids often asked me why my grandma is coming to parents and teachers meeting. I was so sad. My father was in his 50s when I was born, and my mom was in her 20s. Huge age gap. My dad was an active part of my life until he passed in '03. But like your husband he had his doubts when my younger brother and I were children. I was unplanned as well. Nevertheless, I was and still am a daddy's girl, even though he's not with me anymore. Don't let your husband give up. 9-year-olds have no idea of what old actually is. Remind him of that. I have a 13-year-old who thinks I'm ancient, and I'm only 36, lol. She will appreciate it later. I can say this with absolute certainty. even if she doesn't appreciate it now, and he will regret not having time if he gives up now. Please encourage him to give her time to grow a little, and things will change. It's worth it. I would imagine his feelings were really hurt. Yes, men have them, and that may have caught him by surprise. She's old enough to be made to understand that parents are people and she is very loved. She has a dad that loves her and would move the world for her. We need to be careful with the hearts of people that love us. My dad didn't marry till he was 40 and my mom was 26. He was way more patient and wise than a lot of younger men. I was very lucky to have had him. My dad passed away at 64 years old when I was 19. I was never ashamed that he was older. Kids are assholes, plain and simple. They have no filter on their mouths yet. I can't give you the words to say, but you could use this for ideas. My dad was in his 50s when I was born. I wasn't embarrassed because he was old, more because women old and young flirted with him thinking he was my granddad, while my mum was sat next to him. I was a mouthy kid and always yelled at them. Honestly, my friends never really said anything about him being much older than most parents. My mum was much younger than him. I'm 17 and my dad is 62, and he's more active than my friends' parents and parties with my mom every weekend. The only downside is I just hope he lives a long time. 9-year-olds with dads in their 30s sounds so young to me. She's too young to understand this now, but when she's older, and if she still feels the same, you can tell her the alternative is that she never was born. Not because she was an accident, or that he didn't want kids, never tell her that, but because he had a kid in his 30s, it would have been a different sperm and egg meeting and it would have been a different child. I'm sure she likes being alive and existing in this world, so she should feel lucky. It's miraculous if you think about it. Even a different hour on the same day would have resulted in a different child. You and him needed to have come together in that exact moment for her to exist. Not a minute before, not a minute after. Smiling face with hearts, smiling face with hearts, smiling face with hearts. Thing is, kids don't always think before they talk, and she's going to say things like that if she's getting teased at school about it, but the bottom line is she wouldn't really change him for the world, and he knows that deep down. Kids are cruel, and when she frowns up she will realize that he is everything she needed. Your daughter is desperately trying to be somebody that her fear-driven ego tells her she ought to be, and she is mortally afraid of any information that disturbs that narrative. Your husband is the same way. This is the bondage of self that we all have to face, and we will be a prisoner to that ego-generated fear until we recognize the game we are playing. If you want to how powerful ego-generated fear to protect self-concept is, go take your clothes off and stand outside. Your ego wouldn't let you make it to the door. Explore that, and there you will find a way into the solution. My parents were rather old when I was born. My dad was 56 and mum was 42, so have been in your daughter's situation. Unfortunately, I remember being upset about my parents' age quite a bit. My dad could never really play sports with me or do anything too tiring, as it hurt him quite badly. The thing that stuck out the most for me was the fact I wouldn't have them as long as other kids due to their age. I'm in my 30s and have no parents, as my mum died from cancer at 75 and dad only a few weeks ago at 89. It's possible that she may have realized this and is getting upset at the prospect of this and is lashing out at this. Kids say hurtful and cruel things to their parents all the time. Being a parent is like volunteering to be kicked in the balls all day every day till you die. All I can say is, buckle up. It's going to get a lot worse from here on out. My parents had me at 21, and at a primary school play I pointed out my parents to a friend. Wow, your dad is really good looking. I was offended that she didn't say my mother was cute too. Kids are shallow little weirdos. Your daughter definitely put a ninja sword through him, but she's a rollercoaster like all children. Next week she'll behave like he's a hero because he made pancakes or something.